He had not eaten in 2 days. His stomach was empty. His pockets were empty.
The morning sun was barely rising over the small town of Dusty Creek, Texas. The air was cold, and the streets were mostly empty. Only a few shop owners were opening their doors, preparing for another quiet day in this peaceful little town. At the corner of Main Street, near an old gas station, sat a man named Harold. He was 62 years old, with a gray beard that had not been trimmed in months. His clothes were torn and dirty. His shoes had holes in them, and his fingers were cracked from the cold. Harold had been homeless for 3 years now. He had lost everything after his wife passed away, and his small business failed. He had no family left, no friends, and no place to call home. Every morning, Harold would sit near the gas station, hoping that someone would give him a few coins or maybe some food. Most people walked past him without even looking. Some would shake their heads. Others would whisper unkind words. But Harold never complained. He always smiled and said, "Thank you," even when people ignored him. On this particular morning, Harold reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. It was the last money he had in this world. He had found it 2 days ago near a parking lot, and he had been saving it for food. His stomach was growling. He had not eaten anything in almost 2 days. Harold slowly stood up and started walking toward the small diner across the street. The diner was called Rosie's Kitchen, and it was famous for its hot coffee and fresh pancakes. Harold had never been inside. He always felt like he did not belong there. But today, he was too hungry to care. As he walked toward the diner, he noticed a young woman sitting on a bench near the entrance. She was holding a small baby wrapped in a thin blanket. The woman looked exhausted. Her eyes were red from crying, and she was shivering in the cold wind. The baby was crying softly. Harold stopped walking. He looked at the woman, then at the $5 bill in his hand. He thought about how hungry he was. He thought about how long it had been since he had eaten a warm meal. But then he looked at the baby again, and something inside his heart told him what he needed to do. He walked over to the woman and knelt down beside her. She looked up at him with fear in her eyes, probably expecting him to ask her for money. But instead, Harold smiled gently and held out the $5 bill. "Please take this," he said softly. "Buy some milk for your baby. Buy yourself something warm to eat." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head and tried to refuse. "I cannot take your money, sir. You need it more than I do." But Harold insisted. He placed the money in her hand and closed her fingers around it. "I have lived my life," he said. "That little one has a whole life ahead. Please, take it. It would make me happy." The woman broke down crying. She thanked Harold over and over again. She told him that her name was Maria, and that she had been traveling to find her sister in the next town. Her car had broken down, and she had no money left. She had been sitting on that bench all night, not knowing what to do. Harold listened to her story with a kind heart. He wished he could do more, but he had nothing else to give. He patted her shoulder gently, told her that everything would be okay, and then turned to walk away. What Harold did not know was that someone had been watching this entire scene from across the street. His name was Jackson Reed. He was a 45-year-old cowboy who owned a large ranch about 20 miles outside of town. Jackson had come to Dusty Creek that morning to pick up some supplies from the hardware store. He was sitting in his old pickup truck, drinking coffee, when he noticed a homeless man talking to the young woman. At first, Jackson did not think much of it, but then he saw the homeless man give away his money. He saw the look on the old man's face. It was not the look of someone who was giving away something small. It was the look of someone who was giving away everything he had. Jackson felt something stir deep inside his chest. He had seen many things in his life. He had met rich people who would not give a single dollar to help others. He had met successful people who only cared about themselves. But here was a man who had nothing, absolutely nothing, and yet he gave away his last $5 to a stranger. Jackson stepped out of his truck and walked across the street. He approached Harold, who was now sitting back in his usual spot near the gas station. The old man looked up and saw the cowboy standing in front of him. Jackson was tall, with a weathered face and strong hands. He wore a brown cowboy hat and dusty boots. "Excuse me, sir," Jackson said, tipping his hat. "I saw what you did back there. I saw you give that woman your money." Harold looked down, feeling a little embarrassed. "It was nothing," he said quietly. "She needed it more than me." Jackson shook his head slowly. "No, sir, that was not nothing. That was everything. I have never seen anything like that in my whole life." He reached out his hand. "My name is Jackson Reed. I own a ranch outside of town. I want you to come with me." Harold looked confused. He did not understand what was happening. "Come with you? Why?" Jackson smiled. "Because I have been looking for someone like you for a long time. Someone with a good heart. Someone who knows what it means to care for others. I need help on my ranch, and I think you are the right man for the job." Harold could not believe what he was hearing. He thought this must be some kind of joke. "Sir, I am just a homeless old man. I do not have any skills. I cannot do much work anymore." But Jackson would not take no for an answer. "I do not need someone with skills," he said. "I need someone with character, and you have more character than anyone I have ever met. Please, come with me. I will give you a warm bed, hot meals, and honest work. You will never have to sleep on the streets again." Tears started streaming down Harold's face. He could not remember the last time someone had shown him such kindness. He could not remember the last time someone had looked at him like he mattered. He took Jackson's hand, and the cowboy helped him stand up. As they walked toward the truck, Jackson noticed Maria still sitting on the bench. He stopped and looked at her for a moment. Then he reached into his wallet, pulled out several $100s, and handed it to her. "This should be enough to fix your car and get you to your sister," he said. "And if you ever need anything else, you come find me at Reed Ranch." Maria started crying again. She could not believe the kindness of these two strangers. She thanked them both and promised that she would never forget what they had done for her. Jackson and Harold drove out of town together. The sun was now fully up, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and gold. Harold sat quietly in the passenger seat, looking out the window at the open fields and rolling hills. He felt like he was dreaming. When they arrived at the ranch, Harold saw a beautiful farmhouse surrounded by green pastures. There were horses grazing in the fields and dogs running around happily. It was the most peaceful place he had ever seen. Jackson showed Harold to a small cottage near the main house. It had a comfortable bed, a warm fireplace, and a kitchen filled with food. "This is your home now," Jackson said. "For as long as you want it." Harold broke down completely. He fell to his knees and cried like he had not cried in years. All the pain, all the loneliness, all the suffering of the past 3 years came pouring out of him. And through it all, Jackson stood beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Over the next few months, Harold became a part of the Reed Ranch family. He helped with small tasks around the farm. He fed the animals. He fixed fences. He planted vegetables in the garden, and every evening, he would sit on the porch with Jackson, watching the sunset and sharing stories about their lives. The people in town soon heard about what had happened. They heard about the homeless man who gave away his last $5 and the cowboy who gave him a home. The story spread from person to person, from town to town, until it reached newspapers and television stations across the country. They wanted to know about the $5 miracle, as people were calling it. Harold always gave the same answer. "I did not do anything special," he would say. "I just did what was right." But everyone who heard the story knew that it was special. In a world where people often ignore those in need, one homeless man had reminded everyone what true kindness looked like. And one cowboy had shown that sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever. Harold lived at Reed Ranch for the rest of his days. He never went hungry again. He never slept in the cold again. And he never felt alone again. He had found a family, a purpose, and a home. And it all started with $5 and a heart full of love